Lying among the watery ruins of Seattle, the depths of Lake Hill Hospital remain one of the most dangerous areas of the city up to the year 2038, as it had acted as ground zero for the infection within the metropolitan area during the early days. The first of those to find themselves infested with cordyceps had been sealed in the hospital's basement as the military and Fedra attempted to contain its spread. And although this inevitably failed as cordyceps were bound to take over the country regardless, most of the sick who initially visited Lake Hill intending to seek medical attention for their strange bites remain there to this day, festering and fusing together for nearly 25 years in that dark, damp basement, awaiting for someone to eventually make the mistake of setting them free. After defecting from the Washington Liberation Front, Abby Anderson had made allies with Lev and Yara, two detractors from a rival faction known as the Seraphites who saved her life regardless of her affiliations. However, despite making it out of the woods alive, Yara had suffered a severe injury to her arm, resulting in compartment syndrome that was sure to kill her if they didn't get the proper medical supplies to treat it. So, hastily making her way to Lake Hill Seattle Hospital alone in hopes of obtaining what they needed, Abby would find herself caught in WLF custody as they had been clearing the upper levels of the medical center for supplies in preparation for their final confrontation with the Seraphites. But having made some close friends during her time in the Liberation Front, Abby is set free by Nora at great risk to her own position, who informs her the hospital's lower levels may have what she's looking for, as they haven't been cleared out yet. But that was for a good reason. As mentioned, this was ground zero for the outbreak in Seattle before the professionals knew better than to treat the infected. So, searching for the trauma center while moving through the damaged corridors vigilantly as not to alert anything of her presence, Abby begins to discover the remnants of that dark era as she comes upon the decomposed body of a man named Scott, who left a note to his loved ones during his final moments that read, "Jake, I don't think I'm going to make it home. I'd give anything to be with you and Susie right now. I'm hiding with a few of my colleagues. The door is barricaded and those things are on the other side. Things were way worse than we thought. I'm pretty sure no one is coming for us, at least not in time to save us. I hope one day this note will get to you. I hope you and Susie will remember me. I love you both so much. Scott." This helps paint the picture of the kind of horror these doctors went through during this time, as we see an attempt to barricade the door, which clearly ended in disaster for everyone on the other side. But with no infected currently present within the area, it's clear this was only the tip of the tragic iceberg, as while continuing her search, Abby encounters many barricaded doors and stairwells preventing her from proceeding forward. So far, there hasn't been nearly as many threats as expected, but that just means she hasn't been searching deep enough. So jumping down from the ruined rail to a lower level containing the ER without an immediate way back up, Abby begins to discover more and more decaying bodies left behind as she draws closer to the heart of the outbreak. Another note is found on an altar table within a chapel that had acted as a way for two medical professionals to secretly communicate in the early days, reading, "Are they really going back in there today? Every time only half a squad returns. We've lost the lab, it's time to call it. Also, sorry for passing notes like we're in high school. I just don't trust these soldiers listening in. I have no idea what's going on. Why don't they get us out of here? They keep saying evac is going to happen as soon as they make sure the building can be contained. I mean, are they seeing or hearing what's going on down there? We've lost it. I think it's not about containment. I think it's about protecting the data of the research. We need to get out of here. Our friends might still be alive down there. You've seen what those things do. No one could have survived it. Not for this long. It sucks, but they're dead. What are you suggesting? I see Scott fighting with the soldiers. He's more than fed up. We get him and look for a way out. Let's give it one more day. See what these new soldiers can do. One day, then we act. Thanks." This tells us the hospital wasn't simply abandoned after the basement was sealed. There were continued efforts by the soldiers to clear it out over the following days in order to retrieve the data observed from the patients, which kept resulting in casualties. And despite knowing this was a lost cause, it seems like the medical professionals were forced to stay here and work during this time to their displeasure as they awaited an evacuation order that never came, which obviously led to rising tensions with the soldiers. Clearly, the doctors just wanted to get to their families after realizing the magnitude of the situation. However, as a result of the soldiers failing to fully contain the infected, everyone involved lost their lives. It's unclear where the infected who killed Scott and the other doctors on the upper floors were now. Perhaps they escaped into the city or migrated back down to the dark basement below after the massacre. Regardless, Abby passes through the spore-infested ER and begins to see the true scale of this dreadful event, as bloated and deformed clusters of bodies covered in dried fungus line the quarantine tents. If it wasn't for the occasional exposed pair of shoes, you'd barely be able to tell some of these disfigured masses were even human to begin with. The fungus's spread is so bad in some areas that it's completely taken over hospital beds. However, not all of it was dead, as while moving into the surgery unit, Abby encounters multiple clickers and stalkers still lurking around that she takes out, before discovering she needs to activate the hospital's generator in order to power the locked doors, preventing her from moving forward, explaining where the bulk of the infected were now, as the soldiers had sealed certain wings tighter than others. Along the way, she finds another note from an MD named Kayla Higashi reading, "Steven, I can't keep doing this. I know I'm just supposed to run the tests and log the data, but I can't handle this much pain. I escorted some soldiers to the trauma. I wasn't supposed to go in there. I've seen what the patients turn into. Every single adult and child that is brought in here with a bite or scratch is going to lose their mind, and we keep lying to them. I asked to go home and was told I need to keep going. Some bullshit about national security. They offered me an office to get some sleep if I want to. Steven, you need to get me out of this. I'm going to have a mental breakdown." Further showing us the trauma the medical professionals went through between watching their patients lose their minds and worrying about their own families on the outside suffering the same fate. Unfortunately, judging by the turned paramedics still stuck to the walls, many died horrifically from treating their patients before the final massacre taking the lives of Scott and the other doctors even occurred. But exploring further, Abby attempts to push through another sealed door to no avail, only to hear what sounds like some sort of deep rumble or growl on the other side. Clearly, there is something other than your regular clicker down there with her, but if she were to give up now, Yara would certainly die. So praying whatever was on the other side of the door doesn't make its way through, Abby comes across yet another note attached to a fungus-riddled body, this time from the perspective of one of the patients named Don Carter reading, "To whom it may concern, you cannot treat us like this. I understand that many people are sick, but getting shoved in here and separated from my wife is unacceptable. I've been sitting here for over 3 hours without an update. The doctor put some ointment on my bite mark and then vanished. This thing hurts and it seems to be getting worse. Please deliver this note to your supervisor immediately. Sincerely, Don Carter." However, as we turn the note over, we see Dawn's slow descent into madness as cordyceps begins to take over. "Woke up starving, but can't keep anything down. Not even water. My head is fucking pounding. The screaming outside doesn't help. Why did you lock me in here? Someone needs to come. I want to see Sasha. I want my wife. Sasha, help. Can't keep my thoughts. Barely write this. Can't sleep. Too hungry. Get me out. Hungry. Eyes hurt. Sasha." Which unfortunately is where Dawn's story ends. Witnessing the mindset of somebody in the process of turning put into words is so haunting. One thing I love about this section of the game is getting to see all the different perspectives surrounding this event through the notes. But as Abby passes through the surgical suites while the sound of clickers echo all around, she finally reaches the generator and somehow manages to get it running as lights are restored across the basement. However, this didn't mean she was safe. as throughout the now accessible neighboring rooms, clickers lurk around every corner and stalkers await the chance to spring from the fungus-riddled walls. This, without a doubt, is the wing where the majority of the infected were fully sealed in by the soldiers before the others escaped and ravaged the hospital. The deeper she went, the thicker the spores became and the larger the clusters grew, to the point where the infected had begun forming what can only be described as caves throughout rooms with their decaying bodies. If there was a hell, she was in it. Although, again, she clearly wasn't alone, as across the fungus-riddled floor lied a distinct trail of blood, leading to a hall that appeared heavily damaged, as if something violently smashed its way through. Abby knew she had already come too far to turn back now, so against her better judgment, she proceeds into an open yet ruined parking garage filled with decaying cars, before reaching an ambulance that was sure to contain the medical supplies needed. But as she retrieves the surgical kit from inside, she begins to hear what initially sounds like a pack of clickers approaching. That is, until the growls deepen and the stomping grows louder, as Abby shines her light forward, revealing a monstrous amalgamation of the infected before her. This colossal beast has been dubbed the Rat King, due to its inspiration from stories of rats becoming intertwined by their tails. Consisting of at least 9 different infected, this thing came as a result of a stalker or clicker festering for years in a dark, damp, and cramped area while developing into a stage 4 bloater over decades, before fusing the other infected within the area to itself through fungal growth. It turns out that wasn't a cave of bodies. It was a cocoon, and with no source of food around, the infected had no choice but to feed off of each other to stay alive in that sinister place. So forming a type of symbiotic relationship, the Rat King moves and attacks chaotically as one, as it violently smashes its way through vehicles and walls while pursuing Abby, while possessing the capability of expelling spore bombs from its body much like any other bloater. This creature is able to withstand a barrage of bullets and fire, as the fungus has formed multiple plates of armor around the infected. However, despite its immense size, speed, and strength, it is not invincible, as we see, given enough damage, the stalkers will begin to break off from the bloater and attack independently, meaning they haven't developed into a complete single-minded organism despite relying on each other to move. What's interesting about these stalkers, however, is the fact they can expel spore bombs from their bodies, which tells us the development of cordyceps within a person is not linear. Some characteristics of a later stage infected do have the capability of forming early given the right circumstance. The Rat King is by far the largest and most complex form of infected we've seen. But as they say, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. So after giving the beast everything she had, Abby would walk out of Lake Hill Seattle Hospital victorious with the surgical kit in hand. The Rat King had been her greatest adversary yet, and although she can now put the horrors of Ground Zero behind her, the thought of other monstrous amalgamations being out there in the world somewhere would stick in her mind for years to come, as well as mine. You see, I talked about this briefly in my Cordyceps Explained video, but in my opinion, this is the true 5th stage of infection, and will continue to happen given the right environment more and more frequently as the decades tick by, which is given even more credence by a 2020 interview with Games Radar, where co-director Anthony Newman states there were cut notes that hinted at other Rat Kings being out there. But since they didn't make it into the final version of the game, this concept is left up in the air going into part 3. 25 years of development, this thing had nearly become an unstoppable colossal beast. Given it were to fester for another 25, could you imagine the kind of monster the Rat King would become? If steps aren't taken by humanity to overcome the threat of cordyceps soon, whether that's through Ellie's immunity or brute force, I truly believe this will become the future of the franchise. For now, given enough firepower, something like this can be taken down, but we are naive to the horrors out there in the world. So for all we know, something even larger and more aggressive could already be out there somewhere ravaging the streets. But what do you guys think? Did you enjoy the story of the Rat King, and do you think this type of infected is the future of the Last of Us franchise? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. This is by far my favorite gameplay section from part 2, so I hope you guys had fun. But that's gonna do it for me today, folks. As always, thank you so much for watching.